proverb says, tomorrow never comes. There is no such thing as tomorrow. There never will be, because time is always now.
Welcome to the Philosophical Minds Podcast, the podcast about the stuff we wonder about.
And other things.
Authority. Do you respect it? This is one of those questions that I've been asked too many times. And it really always kind of bothered me for some reason. If there was a line to be crossed or a rule to be broken, I was generally the first to cross it and the first to break it, so long as I justified it in my mind, which was no complex task for an underdeveloped prefrontal cortex. So over time, I became familiar with and learned through rigorous trial and error what I could and could not get away with, depending on the circumstances. These instances were littered with various interactions of authority figures intervening in various forms and methods of mental impositions and attempts to course correct. But I think this may have illustrated my deep-seated, seemingly intrinsic aim of understanding the limitations and true dynamics of freedom, as well as the adversary of authoritarian interference. I've always deeply loved freedom and pushing the boundaries. Being that the majority of the resulting consequences were realized outside of external authoritarian forces and instead internal recognitions of karmic laws made manifest, eventually I did realize there was harm in many of my behaviors and actions and self-corrected just by simply paying attention to the effects of my actions, recognitions and disturbances in mentation, emotional unease, how things made me feel. I noticed a correlation between a poor choice and an undesired manifestation and consequence that seemed to be undeniable signals from the universe. Developing an organic sense of morality and ethics, I guess, and I attribute this also partially due to the guiding hand of my amazing, patient, enduring parents, my good-spirited relatives, loyal friends, the diversity of social circles I associated with, as well as my individual free will and decision-making process, for better or worse, through rigorous trial and error. For whatever reason, I guess I had developed a very skeptical relationship with authority and quote-unquote authority figures. This attentiveness and seeking to understand these controlling entities yielding their programmed power projections as disseminators of dominance and control had led me onto a path of deep observations of what it means to have authority and how it is earned. As would be natural, when authority was the controlling force holding me back and consistently in opposition to my nature, anyone that had the power or thought they had the power to control me and my behavior, I perceived as a danger and a threat. And in many cases, in many ways, I still maintain this line of thinking in some aspects. I, for some reason, felt a strong inner compulsion to demonstrate and almost embodied an antagonistic resistance response in regards to these restrictive realities at times. Anyway, authority. It's an interesting thing, and so I figured I'd give my perspective on it. I think there's absolutely a valid place in society for quote-unquote authority figures when it comes to maintaining and creating a civil society, and maybe authority isn't the right word. I think we definitely need protocols in place to prevent and defend against any individual abusing one another physically, harming one another, stealing from someone, for example. I believe there should be systems or people in place to handle these crimes. So I don't have a problem with authority in that sense. I think my beef with authority is multifaceted, though. I'm frustrated with the ideology being used improperly. The subject of authority is very nuanced. We have a system of government that can be identified as a particular kind of authority. We have law enforcement or military officials that are ranked with a certain hierarchy of authority, so to speak. And often positions of authority are granted or awarded to the undeserving or unworthy. I guess you could substitute the word power in these examples as well. Yeah, the issue I take with authority is more about the identification or miscalculated justice, or the unspecific identification of authority, whether it's a corporate entity or individual, or just a cheap attribution or perception of authority. In this regard, to use an example relative, if I have a question about nutrition and health, I will go to who I believe are the authorities on any particular nutritional or health-related subject I'm inquiring about. Some would say I should consult the World Health Organization. They are the authorities. And to them, I'd probably laugh and say no thank you. I think authority comes in many shapes and sizes. Authority can be earned or granted in a perceptual sense, but that doesn't make it true authority. It's really a subject of opinion in many instances. Just because someone gets into a position of power and has a title behind them and or a badge and gun or whatever, doesn't give them the natural right to hold dominion over another in any particular area outside of natural law. I'm speaking specifically to groups and ideologies similar to the policy projectors and the political puppets largely, but in terms of relational dynamics between one another, one's assumption of what it means to have authority in any given situation, I would evaluate on a case-by-case basis. If I'm a child living under my parents and they are providers and caretakers, that, I believe, gives them a natural form of authority, and the use of that authority I would deem valid and in alignment with truth. But like I said, I would evaluate it on a case-by-case basis, and the conclusion that I come to may differ from the conclusion that another may draw. It's a really interesting subject because it can take on different meanings depending on the context and one's own philosophy. It could be real, and it could also be an illusion. But authority and the adherence thereof can only be validated by two primary indications: submission or force, and then a sub-potential triad of plausible responses. One can submit to it consciously or unconsciously and validate that indeed one does indeed have authority over the other. One can invalidate it by rejecting it, or one can have it forced upon them by means of abuse of power. Unsolicited force is the sole construct for perpetual and unfortunate abuses in this instance. This is where I think the real problem or issue sits with me personally. Whether we like it or not, many individuals are drawn to imposing their beliefs or wills onto others and crave and get a drug-like hit off of forceful behavior. And as children, I think there's definitely an enhanced fear of one's will being imposed upon by a physically more dominant adult, for example. If a bigger person has the ability to enforce some kind of punishment upon you for your rebellious attitude or lack of conformity, you have the choice to submit or receive punishment. Some are just simply aware of human nature and understand that desperate people do desperate things. Some people are in positions of power they shouldn't be. It often gets abused, and if left unchecked and unbalanced, corrupt human behavior flourishes. I believe this is the underlying cause of many individuals' quote-unquote problems with authority. So, do I have respect for authority or lack thereof? It's almost like asking me if I believe in God. First, what do you mean when you say God? Because it has thousands of different meanings depending on who you ask. Do I respect authority? Whose authority? And what do you mean by authority? Do you mean, do I respect someone's power? Do I respect someone's position in any given hierarchical structure? What's your idea of respecting authority? Is it bowing down to and obeying an order by a government official simply because they are a government official? Are we obligated to adopt and adhere to propagandistic egregores perpetuated by divisive mainstream media narratives such as Fox News and CNN based off of our party associations? Is this competitive team mentality, us versus them mindset conducive to health and wellness of our nation? Or are we simply at war with ourselves in many instances? Do impersonal talking heads, distant corporations, and foreign institutions really have your best interest and heart in mind? Are they your superiors? Do you value sovereignty? If I look up the definition of authority, the first result is 1, the power or right to give orders, make decisions, and enforce obedience. 2, a person or organization having power or control in a particular, typically political or administrative sphere. 3, the power to influence others, especially because of one's commanding manner or one's recognized knowledge about something. Whose? What's their reasoning? Do they have a valid reason why? These are all interesting questions to ask yourself. In relation to the first, who's enforcing the obedience? In what way and why? Is it for a just cause, based on science and reason? Is it based off of a societal consensus? Is it what we the people want? Without a doubt, many individuals have authority in the sense that they have influence in relation to their recognized knowledge about something in general. Do you respect that? Do you have a feeling of deep admiration for an organization or person having control over a political sphere? For whatever reason? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Authority and its forms are often amplified as a matter of acceptance and or blind allegiance. To whom or what does your allegiance gravitate towards?